Max. Kia ora, welcome back everybody. We haven't quite got a quorum, so if member Coombe and Cooper could sit down, that might help us. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Let's go. Yep. And Deputy Chair's coming. Right, ladies and gentlemen, we now have the third quarter financial report. Obviously it's post because March is to the 31st of March. March is finished. It's followed by the next item, which of course will be our more current progress for the council on our emergency budget. But let's just ask our wonderful staff to take us through the report. Nicola, are you going to start with you? No, Pramod. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. So, as the Chair's introduced, we're here to present the third quarter report, and that covers the period up till the end of 31st March of this year. We've had the CCOs and Ports of Auckland come present earlier this week at the CCO Oversight Committee on their quarterly reports. So the report that we'll be covering today I'll provide a lead off and provide an overview of the group financial performance. John will provide an update on the debt picture, and Nicola and Karina will present on the Auckland Council performance for that period. In terms of our capital delivery to the end of March, we're tracking at about 91% of budget for the same period and about 6% below the same period when compared to the same period last year. The main cause for the variance is related to the late adoption of the emergency budget, and we've also been impacted by subsequent lockdowns as well. We've also had some projects and programs delayed, such as land acquisitions, and more recently, as I've advised in previous emergency budget updates, supply chain issues are also impacting the delivery of some projects. In terms of the operating performance, as you can see from the results on the slides up there, it's continued to be very favourable, both direct revenue and direct expenditure performing very well against the year-to-date budgets. Our revenue picture is still performing much better than expected, mainly from Watercare's infrastructure growth charge revenue, and as well as connections, and for Auckland Council, the consenting volumes have been much better than expected. The other thing that's helped in that space is the Waka Kotahi public transport revenue shortfall that they've been topping up to date, and that will continue through to the end of June. In terms of the expenditure side, we've had delays in some projects, again, similar reasons with late adoption of the emergency budget, as well as some permanent savings around things like cleaning costs that were expected to be much higher in anticipation of, well, and uncertainty around how the COVID picture would evolve. Just hand over to John.
Thanks, Pramod. So on the debt side, the picture continues to be very positive. Net debt end of March for the group at 10.2 billion against a year-end budget of 10.9 billion. Now, importantly, based on our current projections, we see year-end net debt being around 10.6 billion. And as a result, the debt to revenue ratio probably at around 270, if not a tick under. So a lot less than the 290% we were projecting when we put together the emergency budget. And credit ratings remain unchanged at AA and AA2.
In terms of our group FTEs, at the end of March, compared to the end of the previous financial year, overall the group FTEs have reduced by around 215. The majority of that reduction is made up by Auckland Council's reduced FTEs. Earlier this month, a memo has been provided to all councillors from the Deputy Chief Executive, which outlines more detail on how the FTE picture is looking to date and how it's likely to progress through the year. The key things that were covered in the report were, at the time the emergency budget was adopted, and to support our savings target, there was an estimate of where the FTE picture might end, finish off at the end of this year, which was around the figure of 6,000 FTEs. As we progressed through the year, demand for services have been much higher than expected, especially in things like regulatory activity, as well as supporting infrastructure projects funded through shovel-ready and the like, means that there has been a requirement to retain staff or recruit more staff to deliver those services and projects. In other areas such as Auckland Transport and Water Care as well, you've seen some increase in FTEs, and again that's to support some of the larger infrastructure projects, drought and related investment, and some of the FTE increases are also related to activities that generate more revenue for council.
Thanks, Pramod. So just moving on to talk to Auckland Council performance for the third quarter. So our capital performance, we're tracking at 80% of budget. Pramod's already talked to a few of the reasons why that's delayed. Just wanted to add, I guess, on the positive side that we completed the America's Cup infrastructure coming in around 4 million under budget. So had a savings there. We've been putting a lot of effort into capital delivery, and one example of a project that we have restarted earlier than planned was the Hurstmere Road Stormwater project. Just a few updates on the capital program, things that have happened in the quarter. So there's been good progress on the St Mary's Bay and Point Erin water quality projects. Also on the separation of stormwater and wastewater in the Central Isthmus. You might also recall last time we presented on Q2, Craig McElroy talking about the Awakeri wetlands, and we have received an award for that. Some of you will have attended the opening of the new Takanini Community Hub, which just snuck into this quarter as well. Pretty amazing building, one which we have leased and not built, and it was designed in collaboration with Mana Whenua. Final project I wanted to mention is the Williams Sports Park, which is located in the Mangere o Tahuhu local board area, which has had quite an upgrade to enable the better lighting to extend the hours for training and playing, and also to reduce water usage in the park. In terms of the operating performance, consistent with what we've presented to you previously on the emergency budget updates, and as Pramod mentioned as well, the consent volumes really driving up the regulatory fee revenue that we've received this year. I'll hand over to Karuna, who will talk to the other performance measures.
So I'll step through the performance measure results, followed by a brief summary of the key highlights. So out of the 80 measures, 27 were updated, and of those 14 that were not met, these are the ones that continue to be impacted as a result of COVID-19. There were also some targets that were not met for performance measures related to customer satisfaction in the regulatory space, but we are working to address customer concerns with the business optimisation work that is underway. On a positive note, in addition to what's noted up there, we met customer satisfaction targets and resource consents alongside our food and licensing services. As you can also see up there, the record consenting volumes continue to impact performance levels with the ongoing challenges in finding appropriate resource. Moving on to the highlights. As you can see, the pest control, we continue with that program. We won 2 awards. The first one you see up there relates to gardens that are highly recommended for their presentation, design and plant interest with elements of character and identity. The second one is another Green Flag Award, which is an international mark of quality that recognises well-managed parks and green spaces. And so we continue to do well in customer satisfaction across libraries and our facilities. And you'll see up there we had a couple of successful events. the combined culture fest and World of Cultures was represented for over 10 days, around 60 cultures and more than 80 activities throughout the region. And that's it. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Pretty high level, but self-explanatory in some respects. You've covered a lot of it at the CTO committee, and the next report covers the actual financials. But any questions? I will ask for questions or comments. Councillor Casey.
Pleased to see that the expected drop in staff numbers has been revised from 6,250 or 6,350 down, no, from 6,000 up. Can you just talk a bit more about why that's happened, especially in relation to community facilities and people's needs? So it's just quite scant in your...
Want to come back to her?
Yeah, we were hoping to have some more support on that.
Hi, Madam Chair. It's Patricia here. Can you hear me?
Madam Deputy Chief Executive, how are you?
I'm not. I'm in the office. Councillor Casey, to respond to your query, the reason for the increase from 6,000 is because, as you all know, the pressure around increasing volumes in regulatory. Also, there are some areas, in particular planning, governance, and ICT, where there are vacancies that have been held. I mean, in some of those areas, for example, ICT, attracting the labour that we need is particularly difficult at the moment, but obviously we're trying all avenues. In relation to customer and community services, they have had some change processes underway, which has meant that a number of vacancies have been held. And so what we're saying now, with the increase that we requested from governing body, is that we are in a position to start filling them in the parts of customer and community services, particularly active rec, where we need extra resource. Hope that answers the question.
All right, Councillor.
So, Patricia, what's that active rec?
Sorry, active recreation, that's our leisure centres and pools, Councillor. Thanks.
All good, Councillor? Councillor Dalton.
Thank you. Patricia's probably answered my question, and I think the answer might be around the recruiting the staff that we need. So it was specifically to compliance and to consenting, and that we do have the numbers in there to be able to adequately meet our targets and the increase in workload. So, Patricia, if you're there, is that around finding the right people?
It really is, Councillor Dalton. I have to say that we are, not to put too fine a point on it, a bit of a victim to the labour market, the broader labour market, and our people being very attractive, people who are very experienced in consenting. Either to, yes, Kāinga Ora, but also to the private sector, sorry to say. So we are implementing, as we speak, some measures, not just around attraction, but retention for the people that we do have in the consenting space.
Thank you.
If I could just add to that as well, we're working with Kāinga Ora to use some of their spare capacity to assist in our building consent space as well.
That's where they take it. That's where it went.
I didn't want to dive into that rabbit hole, no.
My question builds on Angela's really, and it's in relation to building consents. The previous period we were doing 89%, which was a big boost, and that was pretty spectacular actually, because we'd improved even under pressure. We're now under even more pressure, but we've dropped back to 84%. My question is how they see that trending now, and are we on top of the challenge of being able to, with a loss of some staff, being able to improve our turnaround time to to keep up in the high 80s for meeting the 20-day statutory limit. Not sure who's going to answer that question.
I'm happy to give that a go, Mayor Phil. You're right. The increasing workload, the pressure on resource capacity and availability is meaning that there's pressure on our performance around statutory timeframes. Craig Hobbs and his team do have a plan in place, and ELT were recently discussing that in our quarterly business review in terms of something that looks like, an urgent work plan around how we can attract and retain so that we don't slip further in the performance around statutory timeframes. But it is something that we are watching very closely.
I guess my question, if I was to be blunt, is it going to get worse before it gets better?
If Craig Hobbs were in the room, he would say that he is not expecting it to get beyond the point that we reached at the end of last month.
Thank you.
Well, no further questions. Yes, I have one. Councillor Hills.
Sorry, Madam Chair, and it probably is slightly off topic, but it's on topic of what Patricia was speaking about. Does this sort of go into some of the work we need to do to dispel the myths around our salaries and things like that? If it affects our KPIs and our performance because we're losing, and what I've heard is potentially up to 40 people have gone to kāinga ora and private sector, which is potentially or probably to do with different ways they're attracting that we may not be able to. Is there a body of work going on around, we're trying to suppress salaries or the media expects us to, etc., but it doesn't work necessarily?
Patricia?
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Councillor Hills. Yes, there is a body of work under the umbrella of what we're calling the remuneration review. Look, it's a moving feast, and our REM in comparison to market rates is of particular interest in some areas, like ICT and now consenting and planning. And so my reference earlier to a retention package for staff who are in the category that is of particular demand in the market is something that we have just implemented. So that's part of that. We have taken a look at a particular group of staff and compared salaries across the market and made an adjustment. But the broader REM review will look across a number of occupational groupings in the council where we know that the market has moved faster than we have, so that we can look to figure out how we can get a better balance in there.
Perfect. Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, Madam Chair. It sounds like the flexibility, there's enough flexibility in the operations to be dealing with that, so that's great to hear.
Thank you. Final question, Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, thank you. Just when we're using spare capacity for kāinga ora, do we have to hire them at the rates they're paid at kāinga ora?
I can answer that, Councillor Cooper. We're not hiring them, we are seconding them, and yes, we're seconding them at the rates that they're paid in their current employment in kāinga ora.
Be better to pay them more here and keep them, I guess. Anyway, that's a plan, isn't it?
Exactly the point of the retention package. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia.
So look, John, Nicola, Pramod, Karuna and Patricia, thank you very much. I suppose just in summary, I'll say it's only 9 months through the year, but so far we're 91% budgeted delivery despite our COVID challenges. We're 114 million ahead of budget for revenue. We're 309 million favourable to budget for operating expenditure. Our debt to assets, whilst it's eye-wateringly large, is only 18% of our assets. And if your mortgage at home was 18% of your house value, that wouldn't be too bad. Still within the 270 limit. And I think our staff have done incredibly well. Good luck for the next 3 months. We're 1 month down and 2 to go. So thank you very much to you all. I've got a mover from myself, seconded by the Worship the Mayor. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Now we get the more